Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And today, what I've got for you, I think you're going to find very useful, very interesting. We're going to be talking about fonts. Hopefully, I will be a bit of a font of knowledge today, and I do not apologize for that pun. So fonts are an element that we don't really talk about or haven't really talked about in our past webinars. We've talked about color schemes and updating UXs and doing spacing and all kinds of other clever things when it comes to user design. But fonts are really right to the heart, the key of the web interfaces. It's the key thing for you to take a look at. So today we're going to be taking a look at places where you can get fonts, a quick discussion about the types of fonts you might want to use in your applications, and of course we're going to be showing you how to install those fonts and use them in your Alpha Anywhere application. If you do have questions though, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. From time to time I'll take a peek over there and I'll see what questions that I can answer. So let's take a look at the Alpha Software or the Alpha Anywhere test drive application. When I built that application, I built it using the font Arial, which is a perfectly fine default font. It's kind of boring, but it's effective, and it's not a bad choice for web applications. But it had always been my intention when I was building this application to be able to use different fonts, maybe ones that are even better for web applications. And one that comes to mind is a font called Roboto. Now you'll look here and you may, if you've got really good eyes, you saw the difference between those two fonts. There's a little bit of extra spacing. Where it's really noticeable though is when you're shrinking these down, making them bold or putting them on buttons. Roboto, I think, really shines as a great, easy to read, quick to read interface. Font. This font is used by Google. When you log into Google, one of the three fonts that it selects here is Roboto. I think Roboto used to be the default choice. It looks like Google Sans is now, but it's used by an awful lot of people. It is a great font. Now, fonts can be expensive. They're actually pretty difficult to develop. It takes an artist a long time, and they can go for quite a lot of money, but you can also get them for free, like a lot of stuff on the internet. And Google itself actually is a supplier of a lot of different kinds of fonts, including the Roboto font, which I just showed you. So here's Roboto right here in Google Fonts, and you can log in and choose this font. When you select a font for a website or even a web application, you have two basic choices as how you can implement it. You can either use Google to host the font for you, become the font delivery mechanism, if you will, or you can host the fonts yourself. So the nice thing about having Google do it for you, of course, is that, well, you don't pay for any bandwidth, you just get it for free. It's always there, and it's very easy to implement. You simply just paste in a line into a CSS file linking you back to the Google Fonts. However, there are some downsides. One downside is, what if you wanted to create an application that was, let's say, an extra secure application where you didn't want to make any calls to outside of your server, including the Google Font server? You might want to have those fonts hosted yourself. You'd also might want to have them hosted yourself if you are building an offline application, so that those fonts can be embedded right with your application and can be used when there's no internet connection to get you back to Google Fonts. There are other reasons as well. Maybe Google Fonts goes down or something ridiculous like that. It's just very safe practice to have the fonts yourself being hosted. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I went to the Google Fonts website a couple days ago, and I downloaded the Roboto font. When you download a font, you'll get a zip file, and in that zip file are a collection of files, not just one file for the font. There's one here for black, bold, italic, light, medium, regular, thin, and so on. You'll also notice a couple of other things here. The first is that this type of font is called a TTF font, or a true type font. This was developed in the 1980s by Apple and was used for desktop publishing. It was really terrific because it meant that you could render something on different printers and even on the screen in a way that had pretty good fidelity. But it is an older file format. I don't believe it was supported by Internet Explorer perhaps ever, just looking back at the older versions. Although most browsers now do support the TTF format. TTF, true typeface, again, if you look at the size of the files, they go around 160, 170 for each of the variations of the font. Now, true typefaces can be used in your web applications, but the preferred method is to use a font style called WOFF, the Web Open Font Format. So it's a type of file, a type of that is optimized for use on browsers. So this is really ideal. It can contain some extra programming code to make it more efficient when your browser is working with it. But the other thing is it's also a smaller size file. They found a way to compress the file so it uses less memory. So typically WOFF is what we prefer. WOFF2 is on the way, but WOFF is the one that is currently supported by just about everyone. So that's the one that we want to use today. So the problem is, of course, that all our stuff is true type. We want to have it as WOFF. So what do? We can convert it. And I found a cool converter online over at a place called Font Squirrel. So it's fontsquirrel.com/tools/web-font-generator. When I went there, I didn't have to, it's ad supported, as you can tell. The whole thing is jam-packed full of ads, but I didn't have to log in. It was free and it worked great. So I do recommend it. What I did was I clicked the Upload Fonts button and I selected all of my files on my hard drive, the TTF files, and then they began to convert. So as they're converting, I saw this kind of cool little thing go by, and when it was done, I had a whole bunch of files that I was able to download. These files are in the WOFF format like we like. There's also WOFF2, which we're not going to use today. But interestingly, they gave us some HTML files as well. And these HTML files let you preview the font and let you see how it looks, both as a specimen, that's where they lay out the letters A to Z, or as the sample layout. You can also see other things as well. They even give you a little bit of instructions on installing web fonts, but I think the instructions I'm going to give you today are going to be a little bit clearer. Okay, so here we are. We've found a font that we like, we've downloaded it, and we've converted it to the format that we want. So what do we do next? The next thing we do, of course, is we move these files into our Alpha Anywhere project. So the easiest way to do that in Explorer is just sort them by type. So you can just grab all the WOFF files together and copy them. And when you paste them, yes, you are going to put them into your web project, but you're not going to put them into the top level of your web project. You're going to want to drill down to the CSS folder and then to the style folder underneath. Now, for this application, the style is called Mob Blue Mod. Yours might be called something completely different, but your style folder is the one that's going to contain your style.css file we have here. So I've gone ahead and I've pasted in all of these fonts here into that folder. And by the way, the reason that we put them here and not up at the default web project folder is because it's the style CSS file that's going to refer to these. So it's helpful to have this and this be in the same folder. So don't put them straight up in your web project. It won't work. Okay, cool. So it's now part of our project, but how do we let Alpha, and in fact its CSS file, know that we have this new font that we can use? Well, we do that using a directive in CSS called font face. So font face lets you declare new fonts. And when you declare it, there are 4 things you can specify, but only 2 are required. The first one is the font family. That should be pretty obvious. In this case, it's going to be Roboto. The second is the source. In other words, where is that WOFF file so it knows what to load? But there are 2 other kind of interesting ones here, font weight and font style. Now, when you think about using CSS, you know what weight and style mean. They mean you can make things bold or not bold, or you can make things italicized, and so on. But in the case of the font face, actually what it does is it differentiates between the different files to know when to use which file. So let's go take a look at the font face first without ignoring these. And let's see how we could put in something like that. Here I am at Alpha Anywhere, and I have opened up the style file for my project, the style CSS, which I could just drill down to CSS and then the name of my project file. And in there, you'll see three things that I've added here. I've added font family Roboto, the source to the file, which is Roboto regular web font.woff, and there's another parameter here to let the browser know what file format that font can be found in. It's WOFF. It doesn't just guess, or maybe it does just guess, but anyway, this is the way it's typically specified. Okay, so here's the problem with the way that I've put this in. Maybe you can spot it. How will, when I refer to Roboto, it know which file to use? Should it use the regular one, the bold one, or the italic one? And for that matter, why do we even have different font files to begin with? Well, let's go back and talk about the second one first. We have different font files for a reason. If we had selected Roboto regular, for example, as our font, and that's the only time Roboto, anytime we refer to Roboto, just use that font file right there. When it came time to make that font bold or italicized, it would be up to the browser to figure out how to do it. It would say, let's say it was an O, it would say, oh, I need to make the O thicker because it's bold, or it's an L, it needs to be slanted to the right a bit because it's italicized. But it's really up to the browser just handling that automatically. The problem is that browsers don't have the same eye as humans do. And the people who designed these fonts had a different idea for how it should be rendered than the browser did. So they make very specific changes based on whether or not you're going to use this in a bold setting or an italicized setting or some combination or thin or any of these right here. So each of these represent a different case in which that font might be called. And those are cases that have been designed carefully by a designer. And so we want to take advantage of their work and not let the computer do its best, but not do as good as we could render. Okay, cool. So how do we do that? Let's skip ahead back to our font face command. And the way we do that is for each one of the files that we're including, except for the default one, which we leave alone, we use one of those parameters. So in the case of the bold file, we're going to specify a font weight of 700, which is another way of saying bold. For the case of the italic, we're going to say a font style of italic. And when that is done, the only last thing you'll need to do, besides save your CSS, is actually modify the CSS to find those instances where you were using a typeface that you would like to replace. In this case, I just used the search function. It's built right into the style builder. I chose Arial, and I found all the places where Arial was used. This is a very helpful box, by the way, as you can imagine. I was then able to tell it, go ahead and replace it with Roboto. It went right through my style sheet, and it made all the replacements for me. So when I opened up my application after I republished it, or actually took a look at it here in live test, I could open up the Chrome debugger, which I've done here, and I could point to any element, inspect any element here, and take a look at its font, and you will see that sure enough, for example, this date field, which I pointed at, is now set to Roboto, as we wanted it to. So hopefully this demystifies adding and installing fonts to your Alpha Anywhere applications. So here are the key points, just a quick review. If you want to add your own fonts, you're going to first download the fonts from some source. Google is a great source, fonts.google.com. You're going to convert your fonts to a WOFF file, and I showed you a site, I think it was called Font Squirrel, which will do that for you. You're going to copy in just the files that you need, just the WOFF files, into that file in your project, CSS style name. And then you're going to modify that style.css file for your project. And you're going to use that font face directive to indicate that you have some new fonts that it can now refer to. And then finally, you'll go and edit the style sheet to replace the old fonts with the names of the new ones. So I hope that this was helpful, useful, something that you can take away with you. When I was putting this together, I came across a bunch of good resources, but this one in particular is one I wanted to bring your attention to because there's actually even more about fonts than I brought up today. And it's this one here, csstricks.com. It's called The Best Font Loading Strategies and How to Execute Them. And it goes into some things I didn't cover. For example, what if a font can't load? What should the fallback strategy be? You know, in some cases, maybe you don't want anything to load. Keep the page blank until the fonts load. So there's a whole bunch of other cool things that you can do. So let's see, do we have any questions? You said you mentioned the Alpha Web Projects folder. Could you briefly describe this folder, how it's organized, and what we can find in it? Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. So let's do that live, though. Let me pop over to my Windows machine. And I happen to be in a project here, but let's start right here in Alpha Anywhere. So here is my web project. My web project folder, if I were to look at it in Explorer, you can actually find it in Explorer right here just by clicking this Open button. Okay. And you'll see that this view and this view are the same. The only difference is that this view here has been filtered. So I'm going to click All Files to show you all the stuff that you can find here. So up at the top level, you're going to have your web, your A5W pages. Those are the pages that hold the web components. The web components are the smart things, the things that you program and put onto the A5W pages. Basically, your applications can be made of these A5W components. Often they're going to be UX components in particular. You might also have some files here which are generated by Alpha. These don't get published. They're just here while you're working with the web security system. There's some old DBF sort of style files. Leave those alone. Then you'll see some page security and project security settings. These are used by the system when it's published, but you don't edit those directly. You would instead edit them by going up into the web security section. And then if you wanted to just filter any of these, you can use this section over here to filter it place by place. So let's go into that folder. I'm going to click the button that'll open up that project folder. And you're going to see a couple of things. You're going to see backup and deleted. There's a reason that these exist here, and that is because when you create a web component, I think I've got this set up properly. Maybe I don't. Yes, I can. I'm able to actually roll back and roll forward to different versions of that component. Let me see if I've got one here. Restore deleted files, clean up component backups. Well, that's one thing you can do when you delete a component is you can bring them back if you need to. So these are files that are meant, those two directories are used to keep backups of things that you modify and you delete so that you can get them back. There's the working preview directory. This is just used while you're looking at working preview. If I double click on it, you'll see it has all of these little files and stuff here. They're just used basically by the system when you are looking at a web component and you click on the working preview tab. Not a lot of excitement there. Really, all the fun stuff is usually done here under CSS. CSS, you have your icons, and then in particular, you have your style. And this is the style here. Typically, you don't edit the style in this particular place. You can, but you would use the style editor to edit. But if you actually were to scroll down here, you would find that you could right-click on that style and say Edit. And it will open it up in this, this editor here. So there's that, there's that. This isn't my favorite style editor, though, by the way. So let me show you which one is my favorite. If you go into a web component itself, and let's grab, say, the master UX. Yeah, that's a good one. And I go into properties. There's my style, and I can click it and edit it. And this is a much better editor. Although I've been working with a beta version recently in which it doesn't always load the first time. And if that's the case, I'm going to open up again in a second. That's just a little known bug that we know about. Let me go ahead and close that. And we'll open it up again. By the way, the other thing I should point out, do I have the web projects folder open still? Yes, I do. Is, oh no, I don't. Hang on a second. When this loads, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Scroll that down. Just give this a minute. Here we go. All right, and we are loading. Great. So, well, let's go in opposite order. Let's take a look here. If I had created another project, which I could do here, let's call it, which I can do here under with a new project button. Got to click the right button. And we'll call this webinar. Okay. It'll create for me a blank folder. I'm going to go ahead and click on Explore to see where that is. And you'll see that I now have a folder called Webinar Project. If I go back to Alpha Test Drive Web Projects, you'll see I now have two folders where I used to have just the default, and I'd been working in the default before. So you can have multiple web project folders. There are many good reasons for doing that. But this, I just want to point that out as a thing that you can do, and that's where you'll find all of your folders. So the last thing I want to do, though, is actually remind you how you can get to the better style editor. So let's go over to the web components again. Whoops, I'm in the wrong project. Let's go back to default. Let's open the master UX. And we'll go ahead and edit this. Uh-oh. All right, maybe I shouldn't run the nightly release while I'm doing webinars. Okay. Well, we'll take a look at that. Generally, that should open for you, and you will have a much nicer interface, one that shows you the different styles that you can click through. And I know I've shown that in other webinars, but that's typically the way that I get to, let's call it the better style builder. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Looks like it has crashed. Let's see. Benefits of multiple web projects instead of separate workspaces. If you were doing, that's a great question. I think one good reason to do multiple web project folders is if you're working on different versions of the same application that you would like to jump between. That's probably where I've seen it the most. So that's a good question, but thanks for asking it. All right. Well, that looks like it for questions. That's all I have for this time. But as a reminder, you can always contact us here at guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Hope you found today informative, and I look forward to seeing you at our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Thank you. Bye-bye.